At a small gas station, a young attendant helped an elderly man by paying for his fuel, unaware that this small act of kindness would lead to her unexpected dismissal. The very next day, the elderly man returned with a surprising twist, one that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Hello and welcome to Unveiled Narratives. I'm excited to share another story with you, one that I hope inspires, entertains, and keeps you coming back for more. On a busy afternoon at the gas station, Charlotte moved quickly between cars, filling each tank for the waiting customers. As she finished with one, her gaze shifted to the next in line. Inside a worn sedan, she noticed an elderly man glancing around nervously as if he wanted to ask something. Sensing his discomfort, Charlotte stepped closer, offering a warm, reassuring smile. "Is there a problem, sir? Do you need any help?" she asked gently, her voice calm and inviting. The elderly man hesitated, then said in a quiet, almost ashamed voice, I forgot my wallet at home. I don't have enough cash to fill my tank." His words were hesitant, as though admitting it was hard for him. Charlotte's heart went out to him. She could feel the discomfort and embarrassment in his words, but before she could say anything, one of her co-workers, standing a few feet away, heard the conversation and shook his head. "Lost your wallet, huh?" he called out with a loud, mocking tone. "Maybe Santa can bring you some gas." A few customers laughed, their voices low but not enough to hide the humor in their words. The elderly man's face turned red with embarrassment, and he looked away, his hands wringing in his lap. Charlotte could see the hurt in his eyes, and quickly shot her co-worker a sharp look, her expression stern. Without hesitation, she reached into her purse and pulled out the exact amount for his fuel and handed it to the elderly man. With a gentle smile, she said, "It's all right, I've got this. You can pay me back whenever you can." The elderly man looked up, his eyes filling with gratitude. His voice was unsteady as he said, "Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise I'll come back to repay you." His expression held a depth of gratitude that words couldn't fully express. A few customers who had quietly laughed earlier now exchanged soft, approving smiles with Charlotte. Meanwhile, her co-workers, who had made fun of the elderly man, stood awkwardly, their earlier smirks replaced by discomfort. With a final, grateful nod, the elderly man started his car, glancing back with a warm smile. As he drove away, Charlotte felt a quiet glow of warmth settle in her heart. As the elderly man drove off, one of Charlotte's co-workers scoffed, shaking his head. "You're too soft, Charlotte," he said with a mocking tone. "Handing out gas like that? Do you really think he's coming back to pay you?" From a few feet away, another co-worker chimed in with a smirk. "Sure, go ahead and be everyone's hero," she added, her voice laced with sarcasm. "But you're new. You'll learn how things really work soon enough." Charlotte felt their words nibbling at her confidence, but she remained calm, her resolve unshaken. She simply nodded with a polite smile, choosing not to argue. She knew she had done the right thing, and their words wouldn't change that. Ignoring their dismissive glances, she focused back on her work, quietly reassured in her choice. The next day, around the same time as before, Charlotte was busy at the gas station when she spotted the elderly man's familiar sedan pulling up to the pump. Her heart lifted as she recognized him. Nearby, her co-workers who had mocked her the day before exchanged uncertain glances. They straightened up, hints of surprise and discomfort crossing their faces as they watched the elder man step out of his car. With gratitude shining in his eyes, he walked over to Charlotte, holding out a small amount of cash and an envelope. His appreciation was unmistakable as he said, "Miss, I told you I'd come back. Here's what you paid yesterday and a little something extra to say thank you." Charlotte accepted the cash with a warm smile and, hesitantly, opened the envelope he handed her. Inside, she found several crisp $100 bills, far more than she'd expected, and nearly enough to cover a month's salary. She looked up, moved by his gesture, but gently shook her head. "Thank you so much, but this is more than I can accept," she said, handing the envelope back to him. "I just wanted to help." The elderly man's expression softened, recognizing the sincerity in her refusal. With a warm smile, he introduced himself. "My name's Paul," he said, meeting her eyes with gratitude. "You didn't have to trust me like this, but you did, and I won't forget this kindness." Charlotte smiled back, feeling a deep sense of connection. "I'm Charlotte. I'm just glad I could help you, Mr. Paul." As she handed back the envelope, her co-workers, who had doubted her judgment, now stood silent, their previous smirks replaced with downcast expressions. Some looked away, unable to meet her gaze, embarrassed by their reactions the day before. The elder man gave Charlotte one last thankful nod before he returned to his car and drove away, leaving behind a scene of quiet admiration among those who had witnessed the exchange. Charlotte felt a quiet pride as she turned back to her work, knowing her choice had spoken for itself. When Charlotte's shift ended that evening, she gathered her things, expecting to head home, but her manager called her into his office. As she walked in, she noticed the seriousness in his expression. He motioned for her to sit down. The manager explained that paying for someone else's fuel, no matter how well-intentioned, was a violation of company rules. It opened the door for potential problems. Customers could begin to expect favors, others might start taking advantage, and, worst of all, it could lead to favoritism, which can affect company reputation. "I saw the exchange this afternoon with the elderly man," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your kindness, Charlotte. You did a good thing, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The company policy is clear. We're not allowed to engage in personal transactions with customers." Charlotte's heart sank as she listened, a sense of dread settling in. She had never thought her small act of kindness could cause trouble. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to let you go," the manager said, his voice soft but resolute. Charlotte World seemed to stop for a moment. "I understand," she whispered, trying to hold back the tears that were welling up in her eyes. She stood up slowly, unable to find the words to respond. As she passed through the door, the tears she had fought so hard to keep in finally fell. She wiped her eyes quickly, but the weight of the situation was too much. She had done what she thought was right, but now she was left with nothing but the quiet sadness of knowing that doing good had cost her everything. After losing her job, Charlotte found herself overwhelmed with worry. She had left her home state and the comfort of her family to come here, moving for a chance to earn a degree, a future she could be proud of. Working at the gas station had helped cover her rent and some basic expenses. She immediately started searching for work again. Each morning she pored over job listings, sent out resumes, and followed up on applications. Her thoughts were consumed by the growing worry of how she would cover her college tuition and other expenses. One afternoon, Charlotte heard through a mutual friend about a part-time job opening at a nearby convenience store. Grateful for even the smallest opportunity, she applied right away and soon secured the position as a cashier. But the pay was minimal, just enough to cover her rent and groceries. She was still far from having the funds she needed for tuition, and with each passing day, the possibility of having to leave college weighed more heavily on her. One morning, as Charlotte sat in her small apartment, her mind wandered to how she would manage her upcoming tuition fees. Just then, her phone buzzed with a new email notification. She glanced down, expecting another bill reminder, but instead, the subject line read, "Education Sponsorship." Confused, she opened the email, half wondering if it was some sort of mistake. But as she read through it, her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a standard scholarship. It was a personalized education grant, covering her tuition fees for the semester and even providing a modest living stipend to ease her financial stress. She read the message again and again, her disbelief turning to relief. Then she noticed a line at the end, "Sponsored by a private donor who wishes to remain anonymous." She sat there, speechless, grateful yet mystified by this unexpected kindness. As she contemplated the unexpected blessing, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Mr. Paul, the elderly man standing there, his familiar smile a comforting sight. He greeted her warmly, though there was a hint of something heavier in his eyes. "Charlotte," he said softly, "I've been thinking about you." I heard what happened at the gas station. I wanted to come by and make sure you're all right." She nodded, a small smile forming on her face. "I'm okay," she replied. "I did what I thought was right. I have no regrets." Mr. Paul's eyes filled with concern. "I feel responsible for what happened. I went back to the station a couple of days after our last meeting, but you weren't there. I asked around and found out you were let go because of what you did for me." He paused, his expression pained. Charlotte's heart sank, but she quickly shook her head. "It wasn't your fault. I helped because I wanted to." But the elder man didn't seem convinced. "Still, I can't help but feel guilty. So I decided to do something for you." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, handing it to her. "This is for you." Charlotte took it, still unsure of what to expect. As she opened it, she saw the letter confirming a scholarship, one large enough to cover her entire college education. This is too much," she whispered, overwhelmed. Mr. Paul gave her a soft smile. "I'm just returning the favor. You shouldn't have to worry about your education." She could hardly believe it, but the gratitude in her chest was overwhelming. Still, she hesitated, unable to fully accept. "I don't know how to thank you." Mr. Paul placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to thank me. I'm only helping because you deserve it." Before she could speak, Mr. Paul reached into his coat once more. This time he pulled out another letter, this one sealed with the emblem of his business. "I've been working on a new business venture, Charlotte," he said, looking at her with a softness in his eyes, as if he truly understood the weight of her struggles. "I've run many businesses over the years," he began gently, "but this one is different. It's a new venture, and I need someone I can trust to help make it a success, someone with a kind heart like you. I'm offering you a position as my business assistant. You'd be helping with operations and managing important tasks." Charlotte's mind whirled. "A job?" He nodded. "Yes. I believe in you, Charlotte. This isn't just about giving you money, but about offering you a chance to build something for yourself." Her mind was still catching up to the whirlwind of surprises, but despite the shock, there was a quiet warmth in her heart. The man who had been a stranger just weeks ago had now given her both a future and a way to stand on her own. She looked at the two letters in her hands, a scholarship and job offer, and felt overwhelming emotion rise in her chest. As Charlotte settled into her new role, she was surprised by how much there was to learn, and by how patient Mr. Paul was with her. He took time each day to walk her through tasks, guiding her with a warmth that went beyond any typical mentor. It felt like he wanted her to succeed, not just for the business, but for herself. Sometimes, as they worked side by side, he'd share stories from his years in the industry. His words were filled with hard-earned wisdom, and she felt deeply grateful to learn from someone with so much experience. Every story, every lesson, felt like he was passing on a part of himself. Over time, Charlotte's dedication and growth didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Paul, who had watched her learn and thrive with quiet pride, began to trust her with more responsibilities. Little by little, he handed over the reins, confident in her abilities and assured by her integrity. One day, in his unassuming way, he shared his plan to fully step back, leaving her to lead the company. Charlotte was overwhelmed, her heart swelling with gratitude and purpose. She knew that this trust was a gift, a responsibility she would honor. What began as a brief connection had transformed into something much deeper, something that felt like family. Charlotte felt a quiet gratitude that ran deeper than words, a thankfulness not only for the opportunity he'd given her, but for the kindness and trust he'd shown her. In helping him that day, she had unknowingly created a new beginning for herself, a chance to build a life shaped by kindness. And as she continued forward, she knew she would carry that lesson with her, a reminder of how compassion always finds its way back, often in the most beautiful and unexpected forms. I hope this story brought a moment of warmth and enjoyment to your day. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps keep us motivated to bring you more stories like this. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.